and welcome. I am Sonal Katyal and you are watching the show Flyways, Science of Migratory Birds. Migration, a word that comes from the Latin word migrare, means going from one place to another. When do humans travel? Maybe to escape heat or cold, to look for a new home, or to find better opportunities. But we are not the only travelers. Animals cover miles on foot or in flight to search for the best ecological conditions to survive. And birds have puzzled researchers with their migratory skills since ages. Have you ever wondered how they navigate without any sophisticated tools that we humans depend on? Today, let's take a deeper look into the science of migratory birds. To throw light on this subject, I have two amazing guests with me in the studio today, Mr. Bikram Gariwal and Dr. Monica Kaul.
Thank you for having us.
Mr. Bikram Gariwal is an eminent ornithologist, that is an expert in everything about birds. He is a brilliant author of over 30 books on Indian birds and an adventurous bird watcher. We have Dr. Monica Kaul, assistant professor in botany at Hansraj College, University of Delhi. She has specialized in pollination ecology and environmental sciences. Welcome to the show, Dr. Monica and Mr.
Thank you.
Bikram Gariwal. Let's start our journey with the basis of migration, the reason of it. Dr. Monica, why do birds migrate?
Like you said, migration happens because of various reasons.
Okay.
And birds migrate because they are not able to cope up with the environmental conditions which are prevailing in the environment where they are found.
Okay.
And then there are lots of these challenges thrown by the environment around the temperature in certain countries, like in case of temperate regions, that drops to a large extent, and birds and their physiological mechanisms are not able to cope up with them.
It could be winters or summers.
Yeah, there are two types of migrations which happen. You have fall season migrations and you have spring season migrations. So birds have their own ways to understand nature. So when they are not able to adapt themselves with the nature, they look for certain other things, like they start negotiating other ways out. So migration seems to be one of the ways by which they can escape that environment. Second reason is that there is paucity of food resources. You know, food is something very important for any natural system to survive, natural organism to survive. So in temperate regions, when the temperature drops, there is a lot of paucity of food resources available to them. And then besides that, there are some kinds of other health challenges, some kinds of infections which crop up. So birds want to escape.
Mr. Vikram, I would like to ask, how do they come to know it's, the right time to fly away? What triggers that inside
Well, obviously there are a lot of reasons, one of which is genetic instinct.
Okay.
What happens is, in the colder regions, migration is primarily a northern hemisphere thing.
Okay.
A lot of birds summer in the tundra region or in
the higher
Siberia, Russia, Europe, northern Europe. As it gets colder, the daylight becomes less. They have bread. And food starts disappearing because snow starts covering.
So the number of insects decrease,
grass, carrion, any of that. So they start migrating southwards.
All right.
South in summer, where they come to, let's say, a place like India, which has over 350 migratory birds visiting it every year.
Wow.
Now the daylights are longer. You can bring up more chicks in daylight because the feeding hours are more. There's grass, there's water, conditions are right. So there are certain birds that don't necessarily come to India. They might just migrate to Korea. Some of the birds just migrate to Africa. So that's how it starts. But there is a mystery to it. And why is it that certain birds come to certain parts
of the
world?
Like what tells them where
why
to go?
do they go to Africa and not to Asia? Or why do they go to Korea.
Now, this makes me think, Dr. Monica, that, wherever they fly to, their stopover, if it's so warm, temperature-wise it's better, they have more food, why don't they decide to stay there? Why do they have to fly back?
See, it's a very interesting aspect which birds, they have remarkable memory.
Okay.
They can navigate through various regions and then they remember where to go back. The reason for that is, when they come to tropical areas
Right.
like India or say South Africa, there they find a lot of food and they take that food. But gradually, because in the tropical areas there are also the natives which are
Right.
there, so that's the season for them to grow. So there's a competition happening between
Right.
the natives and the visitors. So gradually the resource base is the similar that keeps on shrinking. So there's a fight, there's a competition. The natives tell the visitors to go away. One reason is that. Second reason is that during that time again there is a sharp spurt in infections coming in here. So because winters are warm, there is some kind of humidity which has already happened, and then there are lots of mutated bacteria, viruses that are there. So they also want to escape that. So they go, and by the time ice has started melting on in these regions, and there is no new flush of the plants there, the fruits start appearing gradually. So they have food there, and there they want to have the breeding and reproduction aspects in their own native lands. So they can't be kept at a place because they know they have very efficient biological clocks in there. They have circadian rhythms operating. They have that memory which tells them they have to go back, and also the reproduction aspect also forces them to go back there. And obviously they want to escape the competition which is thrown by the natives.
Exactly. So they have equally good reasons to go back to their...
Yeah, they want to go back, but some of them are a casualty in between. There are many reasons that many of them are not able to reach to their parent destinations.
Okay. And Mr. Bikram, are there also any birds that, flightless birds that migrate?
Yes. I mean, penguins for one.
Do they swim or walk? Okay.
They swim. There are certain birds which are, again, flightless, who walk.
For miles.
For miles,
Wow.
20 miles, 30 miles, 50 miles. There's all kinds of migration. There's altitudinal migration. There's northwest, east-west migration. There's certain birds which migrate in India from east to the west.
Yeah. We'll go on the types of migration after a small break. Stay tuned.
India Science is an internet-based science TV channel initiated by the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, implemented and managed by Vigyan Prasar. India Science on the URL www.indiascience.in is a bilingual channel with content in Hindi and English. It can be accessed on any internet-enabled device. This video platform is dedicated to science and technology knowledge dissemination with a strong commitment to spreading scientific awareness, especially with Indian perspectives, ethos and cultural context. The India Science mobile app can be downloaded from the Google Play Store and Apple Store.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching the show Flyways, Science of Migratory Birds with me, Sonal Katyal. And we are in a conversation with Mr. Bikram Grewal, an expert in bird science, and Dr. Monica Kaul, an expert in environmental sciences. We'll come back to you, Mr. Bikram. You were telling us about the different types of migrations that exist. So what are those?
Migration is a subject on which so much work has been done, but really nobody's really cracked it. The major migration that we were talking about in the earlier part of the program is from Siberia and areas such as that to parts like India, Korea, Africa. But you must remember there is local migration, which is based on food. Certain water birds, resident water birds, will migrate from one pond to the other, availability of water, depending on the availability of water. Small...
How far that could be?
That could be 200 kilometers or even 30 kilometers or even 10 kilometers.
All right.
Then there are birds like the wren babblers. Wren babblers is a very, very interesting set of birds. They can hardly fly. They have very small wings. But they can't even cross a valley.
Okay.
And eventually they turn into subspecies or later into full species. But they do altitudinal migration. When it becomes cold, they come down.
From the mountain.
From the mountain. So they might travel up maybe 10 kilometers up.
Okay.
Or they might go from, let's say, 3,000 feet to 6,000 feet.
So they go up.
Up and
They
come down. When it's hot below, they go
All right.
up. It's like people go to hill stations.
Right.
There's a bird called the it's a forest starling called the spot-winged starling, which migrates from the east of the country to the west of the country. So it's a horizontal, let's say. There are lots of birds in
Across
South.
the longitudes,
yeah.
right?
And there's lots of birds in South India, which migrate to the north to breed. The famous Asian paradise flycatcher.
Exactly.
Actually, is a bird that lives in South India but comes up to the north to breed.
Right.
The Indian pitta, which is almost a flightless bird. It can only fly 10, 15 yards at a time. It travels all the way from South India to breed in the foothills of the Himalayas.
And it
then
covers
goes
such a
all
long
the way
distance.
back. The golden oriole.
Wow.
So these are birds which make, short migrations. Unlike birds like the Arctic tern, which
8,000
travels from its breeding grounds in the Arctic to the Antarctic,
Wow.
covering a journey of maybe 15 or 20,000 miles.
Almost the
8,000
entire
miles.
Yeah, and it's
common.
amazing. And so there are all kinds of this thing. And there is something called a passage migrant, which means, like we were talking about earlier, you land in northern India, then they'll eat there for some time, put on body weight.
Get more energy fueled
Yeah,
up.
for refuel, as they
Yeah.
say. Then move down. These are called passage migrants.
Every
Things.
bird has a different
Different
holiday.
story.
pattern.
Holiday story, but some return, some don't return. Why don't some return?
That's
Why does the siblings return? So these
That's
are mysteries, and that's a nice part of
Part of
this thing, because
That keeps
also-
researchers busy
Right.
asking questions and finding
Finding
solutions.
answers. One question I have that Dr. Monica, are there any environmental factors that influence their flight, like temperature, the wind?
Yeah,
or
of course.
something? How do they affect them?
As was discussed, that when there is low temperature conditions, so birds are not able to carry on their metabolic activities properly. The entire physiology gets disrupted. There are hormones which are there working in the system. So
Okay.
there's a thyroid hormone which is also there in humans.
So there are chemical changes going
Yeah,
on
there are
inside.
lots of chemical messengers operating in the
Okay.
bird system. So whenever there are temperature fluctuations, that gets as a signal and that reaches the nervous system and tells the bird that it has to migrate. Whenever there is very low temperature also or very high temperature, they will not be able to regulate their body temperatures the way
But
other
do
animals.
these temperatures also affect them while they are in their
Yeah,
flight?
wind sometimes facilitates their.
it helps them.
Yeah, but if the wind is in the opposite direction, then birds have to spend more energy. And at that times they would want to take a rest as well, because they have to the amount of food they have had or the amount of fat sometimes is not enough for
them
them
to travel such
temperature affects their the distance they cover, the drift, and also the velocity with which
And
they travel.
What about light?
Light has a very important role in terms of the day length, as Sir was pointing out, that the entire day length. Sometimes birds have nocturnal flights. They don't. Some of the birds don't travel during the days. They want to have nocturnal flights. So day length has a effect on the pattern in which they move.
So some are built for night travel, some are built for...
Yeah.
also night travel has the advantage that it's cooler.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can also navigate by starlight.
How do
Yeah,
that brings
moonlight
me?
is
How do they
considered to be
navigate
very-
actually?
Well, you know, it's
Have you
another.
proved that?
There's so many theories about it. Some saying that it's a genetic thing. There are certain cases in cranes, particular,
Okay.
when they return or when they migrate, is the older members of the family who lead the way. Right?
Right.
Like some say that it's genetic. Where you were born, you would go back like the salmon fish or the olive ridley turtles, which come back to the same beach too. So there are lots of that. Some say that it's a mental map they have made while they're traveling. Some say that you navigate by the moon. Some say you navigate by
Moonlight
the
navigation is a very
and
propounded
Profound
theory.
theory.
And but just to go back to the earlier one, there's something, you know, there's some birds which fly for 40 days non-stop. So they're fighting both at night and during daylight.
Wow.
The Gargani teal, for instance, takes 40
Without
days to reach.
food?
Without food. That
Okay.
53% of the body is fat. And they build up these reserves. But the loss of weight is very, you know, hardly anything. There's a
But the
record of a
bones-
bird, of a bar-tailed godwit, which was tagged. And it flew non-stop for 14,000 kilometers to New Zealand.
Wow.
14,000 non-stop.
What about the bones?
I was talking about, you know, the bones are pneumatic. So
What's pneumatic?
pneumatic bones are kind of hollow bones. So that holds air in them. So that gives buoyancy. Otherwise, the weight would be difficult to carry. But the
Carry.
bones have pneumatic
They are light
differentiation.
in
They are
weight.
light and they hold air in it.
Air in it.
So that gives the
them
buoyancy to
like a balloon or something.
besides that, you know, there are some magnetoreceptors.
Well, magnetic field will be a really interesting discussion, but I'll pause you on this note and we'll discuss more on that after the break. Stay tuned.
India Science is an internet-based science TV channel initiated by the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, implemented and managed by Vigyan Prasar. India Science on the URL www.indiascience.in is a bilingual channel with content in Hindi and English. It can be accessed on any internet-enabled device. This video platform is dedicated to science and technology knowledge dissemination with a strong commitment to spreading scientific awareness, especially with Indian perspectives, ethos and cultural context. The India Science mobile app can be downloaded from the Google Play Store and Apple Store.
Welcome back after the break. You are watching the show Flyways, Science of Migratory Birds with me, Sonal Katyal, and we are in a conversation with Mr. Bikram Grewal, an eminent ornithologist, and Dr. Monica Kaul, an expert in environmental sciences. So, Dr. Monica, you were mentioning something about the Earth's magnetic field. How does that make any difference in migration?
See, a lot of flight aspects of the birds are a lot of physics. So
Okay.
there's a branch separately, biophysics, and many biophysicists are working in this field to find out what are the reasons and the ways behind the navigation.
Right.
I mean, how do these birds navigate the path, and they cover huge distances, and in between there are water bodies, there are hills, there are mountains. So the major belief is that Earth's magnetic field plays a very important role. We know that Earth acts like a magnet, a bar magnet with the north and south pole, and there are various magnetic impulses which are operating. So that magnetic field is sensed by the birds because they have magnetoreceptors in their bodies. So they understand the magnetic patterns. They can decipher where to go by, that acts like a compass, like you are walking.
Like sailors do.
Sailors
Yeah.
use.
Pilots do, yeah.
So that is a very interesting aspect which physicists are trying to understand. We don't have enough information, but there is a lot of relationship between the Earth's magnetic field and their pathways. For certain birds, there's a concrete evidence, but for certain set of birds we don't have enough
So
information.
it's still something that
people
researchers are
still
looking into.
it. Besides that, biologists have found out a pigment-like structure, a chromatophore, which you call in the eyes of the birds.
Okay.
And
It's a pigment, like a pigment that gives color
you
or
have
something.
in plants there are lots of pigments. You have chlorophyll, you have blue light receptors, you have lots of other pigments. Similarly, these pigments have been found, these kinds of pigments, they're basically proteins.
Something that has a particular function in the eye.
So people are giving evidences that even these chromatophores would be aiding in.
And how would they be aiding?
Because they have receptors for light.
Okay.
So you have blue light receptors, far red light receptors.
Okay.
So UV receptors. Some kind of reception is done by these. It's perceived by these pigments, and that's how
that guides them where to go. And Mr. Bikram, what are the major threats, natural or man-made, that these birds have to face?
Unfortunately, there are lots.
Okay.
I would say a fair majority of the birds do
reach.
reach their destinations. There are many things, one of which are man-made. For instance, tall buildings, which come in the way. They can hit them. There's a big...
Is it just the building or the glasses?
The building, the glass, the reflection, there are many things. Glass panes. A lot of birds bash against a glass pane and knock themselves senseless. The new threat that's coming in now, which is very, very thing, is the windmills that have been coming up all over from Gujarat to Rajasthan. They have these windmills.
Right.
The rarest bird in India is something called the Great Indian Bustard.
Yeah.
And it is in their territory that these windmills come up. And I would say only 50 of them are left in the world.
My goodness.
And unfortunately, the windmills are along the desert in Rajasthan and along the dry belt in Gujarat. And these birds are just banging into the blades and dying. So this is a new threat. Then the threat of, let's say, hunting is probably I would say, is a big problem. There's a bird called the Siberian Crane, which used to come to Bharatpur. And it stopped coming.
Right.
So India doesn't get Siberian cranes anymore. From 2004.
But that
Finished.
was the symbol of migration.
Yeah, migration, and it's gone. It doesn't come to India anymore. The birds like the Amur falcon, I told you, was at one point of time killed up to 25,000 birds a day. And in a 10-day, 15-day migration pattern, over 2 lakhs to 3 lakhs were killed for food. I mean, it was much worse than that, because when you kill a bird, it starts putrefying. So they didn't want it to die, so they would break the wings and keep them alive till they're sold in the market.
That sounds very
It is, but we have managed now to almost wipe it out. I mean, I can't say the problem is resolved, but that's another story.
And that also reminds me, something recently happened in India, that a lot of birds were dying. What was the reason behind that?
See, if you look at the various aspects, we cannot pinpoint a single thing. But the deaths which happened recently in Rajasthan, Samba Lake, and many other parts which got unnoticed was an infection. It was a bacterial infection, botulism. Which caused bacteria infects the cranial nerves and it paralyzes the bird, and
so
gradually,
those are the nervous system nerves, right?
And also because we throw a lot of waste and pollutants into the water bodies, and these water bodies are actually the places where they look for the food. So you already have pesticides which get biomagnified in the food chain. Those pesticides are in the fish which these birds eat. Those toxins are already there in the water which they take in, and then they also eat a lot of the vegetation which is there in the water bodies. So that is also a cause, because algae which are there also release certain toxins, and those aflatoxins and various other things are causing bird deaths. So not only this, there are many other severe problems. Oxygen depletion in the water bodies, which is happening because of eutrophication, because water bodies have a lot of agrochemical runoff in them. So that causes eutrophication, and food.
So our behavior
contaminated.
is somehow, our waste is somehow causing them harm.
Yeah.
It's land is so precious with the burgeoning population. Just outside Delhi, there used to be a wonderful wetland, unprotected, called Basai. For years, we went to bird watch there. Today, Basai has been drained out and high-rise buildings are being built.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot we need to think about, especially about our actions. We need to take a resolution to protect birds and the habitats that they call home. Thank you, Dr. Monica and Mr. Bikram, for
Thank you.
sharing this
Thank you.
useful
Thank you.
information. That's all for today. If you have any feedback, you can write to us on the mail address provided on your screen. Goodbye.